Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's show, overreactions and rumors after the Texans' 18-15 loss to the Denver Broncos in Week 9. Obviously, a lot of moves and a lot of things hang in the balance as the NFL trade deadline is tomorrow. Will the Texans make a move, or will they change anything up after another disappointing loss? Because every single loss for the Houston Texans this season, including this one, has been a one-score game. The Texans have been in it late, and they have had a chance to win every single game they've lost this season. And there were multiple reasons why the Texans lost this game. Obviously, as you see on the screen right now, Davis Mills played the majority of this game under center for your Houston Texans. And one thing that I had in this game that absolutely frustrated me, and you never want to be that fan, you never want to be that guy who is just like, oh yeah, it was for the refs. And I'm going to say this, the Texans did not lose 100% from the refs yesterday. But they were so bad. It was unacceptable, the officiating crew that was out there. And funny enough, I actually even talked to our Broncos host, and he felt the same way. He thought on the other side, the refs were horrendous. So if you agree with me, if you thought the refs sucked yesterday, not even only for the Texans, but just across the board, they were terrible. Like the video. Like the video if you screamed at the refs at least once yesterday. Because I want to see, is it just me? Am I overreacting? Is it just something here at the Chat Sports office, something in the water that we have here that me and the Broncos host both thought the refs sucked yesterday? Let me know down in the comment section, and let me know by liking the video. If you like it, I'll at least know that I'm a little bit sane here because I felt like I was going to rip my hair out yesterday. Now, before we get into these overreactions and rumors, if you're brand new to the program, this is how we grade it on Texans Today. We use our Toro heads meter. So if I give something 0 heads or fake news, obviously not happening. 1 Toro head, a small shred of truth, all the way down to 4 Toro heads where H-Town, it's going down. If I give something 4 Toro heads, you know it's a fact. All right. First talking point on today's show, the refs, the officials should be reviewed from yesterday's game. 3 Toro heads. I wanted to give this one 4, but at the same time, obviously, I don't think the refs were 100% to blame for this Texans loss yesterday. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, Jeremy's talking about the slide. Jeremy's already talking about the CJ Stroud slide and the non-call. Well, I don't even want to start with that. I want to start with this call. Maybe one of the biggest missed calls in this entire football game was this. And reminder, the Broncos scored right after this play. They scored. You see that hold? It's 3rd and inches. The Broncos are running a jet sweep. Kamari Lassiter is going to make the play, and he gets clothesline held by the wide receiver. No call. The entire Texans sideline erupted. I almost threw my headset down after this play because it was one of the most clear and obvious holding calls of the entire game, maybe of the entire season. And the refs just blind out there. They were Ray Charleson out there during this play because this was one of the most clear and obvious holds I've seen and a massive turning point for this Texans team. If they get a hold call here, it's 3rd and 10, and the Texans had held the Broncos to basically 3rd down conversions of less than 30% up to this point. They would have probably gotten off the field, and the Broncos might have kicked a field goal here, and we're looking at a completely different game. But obviously, a no call there, and the Broncos go on to score. This from DeMeco Ryans. I will get into the CJ Stroud hit now. This is what he had to say on the CJ Stroud hit. As I see, it's unnecessary roughness when you hit the quarterback when he's sliding, giving himself up. If I'm incorrect on the rules, I've seen that happen multiple times with our guys. We get a penalty, but for some reason, it didn't happen there. We'll look at the film and see what actually happened there. At the end of the day, we lost our starting quarterback because of that play. And I'm glad you said that, DeMeco, because everybody's talking about the Azeez Al-Shaair hit on Trevor Lawrence, which I agree. That was a similar play call or a similar kind of play style where the quarterback had a late slide, the defender didn't have time to disengage and made a hit. Yes, Azeez Al-Shire was straight on. The Broncos defender came from the side. We're comparing apples to oranges there. But the one thing that DeMeco said is, other teams get that call, we do not, even with replay assist. I take you back to the Texans playoff game last year. You remember this call? Patrick Mahomes slid extremely late. He didn't even slide. He just dead dropped down on the ground. 2 Texans players hit each other in the helmet. Even after review, the Chiefs get this call. Mahomes gets this call. And that is my biggest gripe with the NFL. That is my biggest gripe with this play. Because I had another Texans content creator go after me on Twitter yesterday saying, well, if CJ just played like Mahomes, if CJ was just as good as Mahomes, what the hell are you talking about? Like, we're saying, every single player is differently officiated in the NFL? That's not how it's supposed to be whatsoever. And 2 things can be true with that CJ Stroud hit. Yes, CJ slid late, and the defender didn't make contact with his head and neck area. That is true. But it is also true that the NFL has set a precedent that they're going to protect their quarterbacks. And you can't tell me that if you changed out CJ Stroud for Patrick Mahomes in that play, that it wouldn't have stood as a 15-yard penalty. I literally don't believe you if you're telling me with a straight face that if you changed that play with CJ Stroud to Patrick Mahomes, that he wouldn't have gotten that 15-yard penalty call. No way. And that is the biased officiating that is ruining the NFL because, of course, Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL. He is a generational quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks, maybe if not the best quarterback to ever play the game. But whenever you start calling the officiating for players and not for the entire league, you turn into the NBA. You see how everyone gripes about LeBron James, about James Harden, around the top players in the game getting calls that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting calls that nobody else would get? And everybody hates it. And that's what the NFL is doing right here. They're saying, if you're not Patrick Mahomes, if you're not Josh Allen, if you're not a top 3 quarterback in this NFL, well, you're not getting that call, buddy. And it just infuriates the hell out of me. So let me know. Be real with me right now. Were you pissed that they picked up the flag on CJ yesterday? There were some people. There was even Texans fans. Like I said, a content creator came at me yesterday and was like, yeah, you're dumb for thinking they should have called the penalty on that one. For me, maybe, obviously, after watching the replay, it was not contact to his head and neck area. But for me, it's the precedent. You can't say you're protecting quarterbacks, make calls like that throughout the year, and then go, on this instant, I think we're going to turn over a new leaf and stop protecting QBs. Makes no sense to me. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Be real with me. Let me know, am I tripping, or is this actually something the NFL should work on and be really scrutinized for? Next up, Nick Caley. Was his red zone calls yesterday, were they horrible? 4 Toro heads. They were atrocious. And I'm going to take you through the 2 play calling scenes where the Texans had the ball inside the 5-yard line. First goal line trip that the Texans had yesterday. Here are the 4 calls that led to a field goal. We're at the 1-yard line, right? Notice, no quarterback sneaks here. You're at the 1-yard line. No quarterback sneaks here. Okay. They do a Nick Chubb run up the middle. No gain. They do the same exact play twice to British Brooks up the middle. No gain. 4th down and goal. Blake Fisher false start. Texans end up kicking a field goal. Now let's go to the second goal line trip where we're on the 3-yard line with our backup quarterback. You decide to QB sneak it. I mean, I think Nick Caley laughed to himself when he called the QB sneak here because you can't be fucking serious that you are calling a QB sneak from the 3-yard line when you wouldn't call it from the 1-yard line, man. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy watching the Texans sometimes because I'm like, you don't call a QB sneak on the 1. But 2 yards back, you're like, you know what? Now's the time we call the QB sneak. And I mean, from there, the rest of it, you see, it was a holding call on the Nico Collins jet sweep. I didn't have too much, I didn't hate this call on the Nico Collins jet sweep. It was just a bad hold by Xavier Hutchinson. You're then set back, and then, you have a run with Woody Marks on 2nd and long. I didn't really get that, and then Mills got sacked. So this led to another field goal. Overall, just the fact talking talk about the refs. This is a major reason why you lost the game. You got basically to the 2-yard line twice, didn't score a touchdown. You're not going to win games like that, especially like when your defense is holding opponents to under 20 points and you can't get touchdowns. You're not going to win games, man. You're just not going to win games. Next overreaction. Do the Texans need a premier running back? I'm going to give this one 2 Toro heads. I've been on the train of, the Texans, they're good with who they have. They're decent. They have, Woody Marks. They have Nick Chubb. But it's just shown that it's not enough, man. It's just not enough for this Texans offense. And if they want to win games this season, they need to make some sort of change, or we need to see Joe Mixon back in the lineup. The Texans' run game yesterday was nothing against the Broncos. Chubb and Marks combined for 21 carries for 61 yards. That's less than 3 yards a carry. The Texans must have a running game to lean on, especially when you have a backup quarterback in Davis Mills, who he made some good plays, but he showed why he was a backup yesterday as well, missing some key throws at the same time. And Davis Mills, he's a good backup, but you need a balanced offense, especially when you don't have your starting quarterback in. And the fact of the matter is, Joe Mixon, this team is missing more than anyone else this season. He masked a ton of issues for the Texans last year. Had over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. He even missed a couple games last season for the Texans as well. His playmaking and his ability to, just make something out of nothing, the Texans don't have that this year. Nick Chubb is a good running back. He's a good north and south guy if the blocks are in front of him. But that's the other problem. The Texans' offensive line, run blocking this year, has not gotten better. So the fact that they don't have those rushing lanes, and then you don't have a dynamic back in Joe Mixon, that's led to a lot of issues. And I think the Texans, they need to reconsider their plans moving forward because, it's just time. I mean, they need either a confirmation from Joe Mixon that he'll be back in the next couple weeks, or they need to go ahead and make the call to the New York Jets and get Breece Hall in a Texans uniform next week. One of those two things needs to happen. Because if they want to be serious about winning, trying to get a wild card spot, they need to make some changes. Now, I have some more overreactions coming up in just a moment, but I couldn't do today's show if it wasn't for our amazing sponsor over at Prize Picks. Get started today with America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, our friends over at Prize Picks. The hard-hitting football action is even better with Prize Picks. The weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Play Prize Picks to get action in football in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. They got you covered. And Prize Picks, they're the only app that offers injury reboots. And if you had a Texans lineup yesterday, that was much needed because this is what I was rolling out. And obviously, you had C.J. Stroud. And if one of your players leaves in the game in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks won't count as a loss. So good on me, because if not, I would have lost my lineup. But that helped me win thanks to Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. All right, next overreaction up. Is this the best Texans defense we've had all time? Not ready to say for sure, but I'm going to give this one 2 Toro heads and saying it's trending in that direction. I mean, this team is amazing on defense. And I know they've had some lapses here and there, but overall, you look at the teams that they've played and what they've held them to. I mean, did we not see the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football last night absolutely put it on the Commanders? Texans held them to a decent amount on Monday Night Football. You look at the Bucs, how they're scoring, bukus of points on every other team. Texans held them to a relatively low number. Same with the Rams, same with the Jags. This Texans defense has put on and showed up this year. And yesterday was no different. They shut Denver down. They put Bo Nix in clamps yesterday, and they held one of the top rushers in the NFL. I know it's crazy me saying that. J.K. Dobbins, he's actually in the top 5 for rushers in the NFL this season. They held him to 61 yards yesterday. And you look at the plays, I mean, the Broncos offense yesterday, barring that final drive where they were at the 40, their own like 35, 40-yard line, Bo Nix had like a 30-something yard run here. You take that out, the Texans defense held them basically for under 250 yards. Bo Nix had a under 50% completion percentage. And you probably look at that closer to around 3-point-something yards per carry. And you also had two turnovers on a muffed punt, and you had an interception. Stingley probably could have had another. So this defense, it is frustrating, and it's just so disheartening because your team is playing so well on defense, and they are just giving you so much juice, and then the offense falls flat. You're going 3 and out. You're not moving the ball, and you're not getting points on the board, and you're not scoring when you do move the ball into the red zone. Quick question for you. I was debating with a couple of my coworkers in the office because they were asking me, if the Texans had a decent offense, how many wins do you think they would have this year? If I'm being honest, they're sitting at 3 and 5 right now. If we have a decent offense, just a middle of the pack, like somewhere between 12 and 16 ranked offense, I think the Texans have 6 wins this year. Let me know down in the comment section, how many wins do you think the Texans would have this year if they just had a decent offense? Right now we have a bottom 10 offense. If it was middle of the pack, I'm thinking the Texans at least have 2 or 3 more wins on the year. Next up, DeMeco had some horrible clock management up against the Denver Broncos. Yes, 3 Toro heads. And, it really came down to the final moments of the game. And, I think DeMeco's a great coach. Obviously, this team played their freaking asses off all game long for DeMeco. And this team, the heart and soul of this team, runs through DeMeco Ryans and his leadership, and you see that in the defense out there. But at the end of the game, if I'm going to give him flowers, and I'm going to say this defense amazing, I love DeMeco, which I think DeMeco's the right guy. I in no way am ready to move on from DeMeco at this season, probably even at next season, from what he's done for Houston so far. I will say, the final drive was egregious. Your offense hadn't done anything this whole game, and you decide to put the fate of this game on your offense. With 1:24 left, you get the ball inside your 20-yard line, and instead of running the ball, making the Broncos use some of those timeouts, maybe running out some clock, you decide 3 passes. Denver doesn't have to use a single timeout, and you basically give them the ball back into scoring position with 2 timeouts, set them up beautifully. You put your defense in the worst position possible, and it's crazy because DeMeco had leaned on the defense the entire game. There was 2 separate instances where it was 4th and short near the midfield line, between the 40s, and you didn't go for it on 4th down. So all of a sudden, in the final minute and a half of the game, you're like, you know what? I'm putting it on the offense. Why? Your defense was the major sticking point to why you were even in that game. Why go ahead and put it on the offense? I know you want to put faith in those guys and you believe in certain players on this team, but you had to be smarter there. You can't let the Broncos get the ball with a minute left, 2 timeouts at their 40-yard line. That was just a recipe for disaster already. Once the Texans had that 3 and out, I literally was like, this game's over. And it was, because the Broncos, you gave them the ultimate opportunity to win that game. You should have gone into overtime. You should have, laid your chances with trying to have a win. Honestly, if I was the Texans, I would have tried to play for overtime. And as crazy as it sounds, I would have kicked it. I would have said, we're going to play on defense first, try to get the ball second, and get a field goal to win it. Because your defense was the reason you were in that game. And all of a sudden, you're like, you know what? We're going to let the offense go. I think that was horrible clock management and just horrible management overall for this Texans team. And lastly, the Texans season is done. I'm only going to give this one 2 Toro heads. And, it's tough because, you're sitting at 3 and 5, and basically for the Texans to get a wild card spot, you got to win 7 out of your next 9 games if you're the Houston Texans for even a chance at the wild card spot, and that's not even guaranteed. Like, you got to win games, and you still play the Colts twice. You still play the Bills on Thursday Night Football. You also still play the Kansas City Chiefs, and yeah, you have the Jaguars this week. So that is very little room for error in this Texans team over the next 9 weeks. You basically got to win out if you're the Houston Texans or close to it. Because right now, this is where the AFC playoff picture is, and nobody in their right mind would have had this as the division leaders halfway through the season. The Colts, Patriots, Broncos, and Steelers. Nobody. And you have the Chiefs sitting there ahead of you in the wild card race. You're tied with the Baltimore Ravens at 3-5. Luckily, you have the tiebreaker over them if it comes down to it. I don't know if it will. But you've got to scratch and claw to make it to the playoffs. And luckily, you do play the Chargers later on in the year as well. You play the Jags. The Chargers and Jags play each other as well. So there are some, scenarios where a couple teams ahead of you get losses. You also play the Bills. So you have a chance to give losses to other wild card teams in the process. But like I said, there's very little room for error. You got to win. You got to win. And that's why it is so important that you stay up to date with Houston Texans news and rumors this week, especially because CJ Stroud, we're all looking at the injury report. If he can't go this week up against the Jags, I'm turning that into 4 Toro heads that the season's over. Because if you lose to the Jags in Week 10, I don't see how you climb out of that going up against the Bills, the Chiefs, the Colts twice, where you can basically not lose a game for the rest of the season. CJ Stroud, the Texans season is in your hands, and hopefully he's able to go this week. Make sure you hit that sub button to stay tuned.